As I stepped into the office building, the cool air hit my face, invigorating my senses. It was still early, the fluorescent lights humming softly above me, and the world outside was just beginning to wake up. My heart raced with anticipation. Today was the day we would finalize the big marketing campaign I had poured my heart and soul into. I couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and nervous energy, especially knowing that David would be there. David. Just thinking about him sent a thrill coursing through my veins. He was my boss, charismatic and charming, with a magnetic presence that drew people in. We had shared countless late nights in the office, working side by side, but there was always an unspoken tension between us, an electricity that crackled in the air. I had tried to ignore it. After all, I was married to Mark, a wonderful man who supported my career. But as I walked to my desk, I felt the weight of my secrets pressing down on me. "Morning, Emily," my colleague Sarah called out cheerfully as she passed by. I forced a smile, nodding in response, but my thoughts were already drifting to David. I could hear his voice echoing in my mind, teasing and playful, and I wondered what today would bring. As I settled into my workspace, I glanced over at David's office. The door was slightly ajar, and I could see him inside, reviewing some documents. He looked up just then, catching my gaze. Our eyes locked, and for a moment, it felt as if the world around us faded away. There was a spark, a silent acknowledgement of what was brewing beneath the surface. I quickly looked away, my cheeks flushing, as I busied myself with my computer screen. The day progressed slowly at first, filled with the usual meetings and emails. But as the clock ticked closer to our brainstorming session, I felt a thrill of anticipation. When I finally walked into the conference room, my pulse quickened at the sight of him leaning casually against the table, a confident smile playing on his lips. "Ready to create some magic?" he asked, his voice smooth and inviting. I chuckled, trying to mask my nervousness. "With you around, how could we not?" As we began tossing ideas around, the atmosphere shifted. The flirtation escalated, and I found myself leaning closer to him, drawn in by his charm. "What if we take a more provocative approach?" I suggested, my heart racing as I caught his gaze. David raised an eyebrow, a playful grin spreading across his face. "Provocative? I like the sound of that. You really know how to push boundaries, don't you?" I swallowed hard, feeling a rush of adrenaline. "I believe in making a statement. We need to grab their attention." "Trust me, Emily. You already have my attention," he replied, his voice dropping to a low murmur. The thrill of his words sent shivers down my spine. My heart pounded in my chest as we exchanged playful banter, each word laced with an intensity that felt dangerously intimate. It was intoxicating, and I couldn't help but indulge in the moment. Later, as the day wound down, David invited me into his office under the guise of discussing the campaign further. The moment the door closed behind us, I felt the charged atmosphere shift again. David stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "I've been thinking about you a lot lately," he confessed, his gaze piercing into mine. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I stepped back, my heart racing wildly. "David, we shouldn't—" But before I could finish, he reached out, his hand gently grasping my wrist, pulling me closer. "Why not? There's something between us, Emily. Something real." And then, in a moment that felt both right and utterly wrong, he kissed me. It was a kiss filled with urgency and desire, as if we were both starved for this connection we had been denying. My mind screamed at me to stop, to pull away, but my body was betraying me, melting into his embrace. Just as the kiss deepened, the sound of the door creaking open shattered our world. I froze, panic flooding my veins as I turned to see who had intruded on our moment. My stomach dropped. I felt the air thicken around me as the door swung open, and time seemed to freeze. My heart raced, and a chill ran down my spine as I turned to see Mark standing there, his face a mixture of disbelief and betrayal. The expression in his eyes cut deeper than any knife. "Emily," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, laced with confusion. I could see the wheels turning in his mind as he processed the scene before him. David and me, caught in a moment I had thought was secluded, safe from prying eyes. "Mark, I stammered, the words failing to form in my throat. The weight of my actions crashed upon me like a tidal wave, pulling me under. David's hand fell from my waist, and the space between us felt like an insurmountable chasm. "Save it," Mark shot back, his eyes narrowing. "I just walked in on you two. What is there to explain?" He stepped forward, and I instinctively took a step back, guilt flooding through me. "Mark, please, let me explain," I begged, my voice trembling. I felt the heat of shame creeping up my cheeks. "It's not what it looks like." "Not what it looks like?" His voice rose, echoing off the walls of David's office. "You're in here, alone, with him. What else could it be?" His anger was palpable, and I could see the hurt in his eyes morphing into something darker, more furious. "David and we were just—" I searched for the right words, but my mind was a jumbled mess. I had to make him understand, but how could I explain the unexplainable? "Just what, Emily? Just flirting? Just kissing? Is that what you call this?" His voice dripped with sarcasm, making my stomach turn. I felt David shift beside me, a silent presence that suddenly felt like an intruder. "Mark, let's talk about this calmly," he said, trying to intervene, but Mark's glare silenced him. "Calmly? You think I can stay calm, seeing my wife in this position with you?" Mark's fists clenched at his sides, and I could sense the storm brewing beneath the surface. "Mark, please," I pleaded, tears welling in my eyes. "I never meant for this to happen. It just happened. I was confused, and I—" "Confused?" he interrupted, his voice rising again. "You're saying you were confused while you were kissing him? What kind of excuse is that? You think I'm just supposed to accept that?" My heart sank as I watched the man I loved slip further away from me. I could see the fissures forming in our marriage, the cracks widening with each passing second. "I love you, Mark," I whispered, but the words felt hollow, as if they were meant for someone else. Mark's expression softened for a brief moment, but it quickly hardened again. "Get out," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Both of you. I can't look at either of you right now." "Mark, please," I begged again, stepping toward him, but he held up a hand, stopping me in my tracks. "Don't. Just don't. I need time." His eyes were filled with pain, and I felt my heart breaking as he turned and stormed out of the office, slamming the door behind him. The silence that followed was deafening. I stood frozen, my mind racing. David shifted beside me, his expression a blend of concern and confusion. "Emily, I didn't know he would come in," he said softly, reaching for my arm. "Don't," I said, shaking him off. My heart was still pounding in my chest, and I felt a whirlwind of emotions, guilt, fear, anger, colliding within me. "This is your fault, too. You encouraged this. Emily, I didn't mean for this to happen," he said, stepping closer, his tone earnest. "But we can still— Stop!" I cut him off, my heart racing with panic. The last thing I needed was for him to try and downplay this. "You don't get it. I have to fix this. I can't lose Mark." As I turned to leave, David's hand caught my wrist. "Wait. We can talk this through. I want to help you." I pulled away from him, feeling a mix of anger and confusion. "Help me? By what? Dragging me deeper into this mess? I need to think. I need to figure out how to salvage my marriage." With that, I fled the office, my heart heavy with the weight of my choices. I could feel tears streaming down my face, each step echoing with the reality of what I had done. I had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, and now I was left standing amid the ruins of my life, unsure of what to do next. The next day at work felt like a surreal nightmare I couldn't wake up from. As I walked through the office, the usual buzz of chatter and the hum of coffee machines seemed muted. My colleagues glanced at me sideways, their whispers weaving around me like a suffocating shroud. I could feel the weight of their stares, a mixture of pity and curiosity. I tried to focus on my tasks, but the reality of the previous day's events clawed at my mind, refusing to let me concentrate. "Hey, Emily," Sarah, a close colleague, approached me hesitantly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are you okay? You seem off." I forced a smile, but it felt brittle on my lips. "I'm fine, just a little tired," I lied. My heart raced as I thought about how to explain what had happened without revealing the truth. There was no way I could tell her that I'd been caught in a compromising position with my boss, nor did I want to relive that moment. "Are you sure?" "You can talk to me if you need to," she offered, concern etched on her face. "Really, I appreciate it, but I just need to get back to work," I said, steering the conversation away from my turmoil. I turned back to my desk, the tension in my chest tightening as I tried to bury myself in emails and reports. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the image of Mark's face when he walked in on us. Shock, betrayal, and the hurt radiating from him like a physical blow. Mid-morning, my phone buzzed with a message. It was David. "Can we talk?" The words sent a shiver down my spine, a mix of dread and a strange thrill coursing through me. I hesitated before replying, knowing that whatever he wanted to discuss would only complicate things further. But the pull towards him was undeniable, like a moth drawn to a flame. I glanced around the office, making sure no one was watching before I typed back, "Okay, where?" "Meet me in the conference room in 10. I took a deep breath, trying to quell the storm of emotions swirling inside me. The conference room was eerily quiet when I arrived, the large windows letting in bright sunlight that felt harsh against my troubled mind. David was already there, leaning against the table with that charming grin of his, but it felt different now, tainted. "Hey," he said, his voice smooth but laced with an intensity that made my heart race. "I've been thinking about us." "About yesterday?" I asked, crossing my arms defensively. "I'm not sure this is the right time, David." "Why not? We can't just pretend it didn't happen. I want you, Emily. I've wanted you for a long time, and I can't just walk away from that," he said, stepping closer. His eyes bore into mine, and I felt the familiar thrill mixed with guilt. "David, what about Mark?" I whispered, feeling my stomach twist at the thought of my husband. "I can't just throw everything away." "Why not? He doesn't deserve you. You deserve to be happy, and we have something special," he insisted, the intensity of his gaze making it hard to think straight. "You're asking me to forget about my entire life," I replied, my voice trembling. "I can't do that." "Emily, you're not happy with him. You know that deep down. We can have something real, something exciting." He pressed, his voice dropping to a low, seductive tone. "Real or a fantasy?" I shot back, the words escaping before I could stop them. "This is a mess, David. I'm in a mess." He stepped back, his frustration evident. "I just want you to think about it. We can't ignore this connection." As he turned to leave, my heart raced at the thought of what would happen next. I was caught between two worlds, my heart torn between desire and loyalty. I wanted to scream, to run away from this tangled web I had woven. But the truth was, I was still entranced by his words. That evening, as I returned home, the weight of the day hung heavily on my shoulders. Mark was already home, his presence a stark reminder of my betrayal. I walked into the living room, and he looked up, his expression unreadable. "Emily," he said, his voice low, "we need to talk." My stomach dropped. I knew what was coming, and the pit of guilt inside me felt like a stone. There was no escaping the truth now. No more lies. "Mark, I started, but the words choked in my throat. "Just tell me the truth," he interrupted, his eyes narrowing. "Did you sleep with him?" I took a shaky breath, the air thick with tension as I met his gaze. "Yes," I finally admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I did." The silence that followed was deafening. His expression hardened, and I could see the hurt flickering in his eyes, like a candle about to be snuffed out. "Why?" he demanded, his voice trembling with emotion. "I don't know, Mark. It just happened," I cried, tears spilling down my cheeks. "I never wanted to hurt you." His face contorted with pain, and I felt like the ground beneath me was giving way. "You think that makes it any better?" he asked, his voice breaking. "I trusted you." "I'm so sorry," I sobbed, feeling the weight of my choices crashing down on me. "Sorry doesn't fix this, Emily," he said, anger and heartbreak mingling in his tone. "I need time. I can't do this right now." And with that, he turned away, leaving me standing there, shattered and alone, while the reality of my actions settled like a heavy fog around us. The door slammed shut behind Mark, the echo reverberating through the now empty house, leaving me in a suffocating silence. My heart raced, a mix of panic and guilt clawing at my insides. I sank onto the couch, the weight of my actions crashing down on me like a tidal wave. How had I let it come to this? I stared at the walls, their familiar paint now feeling suffocating and foreign, as if they were witnesses to my betrayal. "Emily," I whispered to myself, trying to anchor my thoughts. "What have you done?" The image of Mark's face, hurt and angry, flashed in my mind, and I felt tears prick the corners of my eyes. I had betrayed him, the man who had stood by me through everything. The realization stung more than any physical blow. I had thrown away our years together for a moment of passion, a fleeting thrill that now felt like a curse. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, breaking the heavy silence. I reached for it, half expecting it to be Mark, but it was a message from David. "Let's talk. We need to figure this out." I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to reach out to him, to bask in the comfort he offered, but the other part screamed in guilt. I had a husband, a good man, who deserved better than this chaos I had created. With a deep breath, I typed back, "I can't right now. I need time." I hit send, feeling a strange mixture of relief and regret. My phone buzzed again almost immediately. "Emily, please. You can't ignore what we have." The intensity of his words sent a thrill down my spine, a reminder of the fire we'd ignited together. But did that fire justify the destruction it had caused? I tossed the phone aside, feeling overwhelmed by the whirlwind of emotions. The world outside my window blurred into a haze as I lost myself in thought. I knew I had to face Mark again. I couldn't let this end on such a bitter note. He deserved an explanation, a chance to hear my side. But the fear of confrontation loomed large. What if he didn't want to hear me out? What if he was done with me for good? I stood up, pacing the living room, my mind racing. I had to apologize. I had to make things right, even if it meant exposing the wounds I had inflicted. I grabbed my keys, heart pounding as I headed for the door. The night air was cool against my skin, a stark contrast to the turmoil within me. I drove through the familiar streets, each turn a reminder of the life I was risking. As I pulled up in front of our home, I hesitated. Would he even want to see me? I took a moment to collect myself, wiping away the remnants of tears that had spilled down my cheeks. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of the car and walked up to the door. My heart raced as I knocked softly, the sound echoing in the quiet night. "Emily?" Mark's voice came from inside, laced with confusion, and my heart sank. He opened the door, his expression a mixture of anger and hurt. "What do you want?" I came to talk," I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. "Can we sit down?" He hesitated, eyes narrowed as he assessed me, then stepped aside, allowing me to enter. The air was thick with unresolved tension. I sat on the edge of the couch, feeling like a child summoned to the principal's office. "Go on," he said, crossing his arms, the pain evident in his posture. "I'm so sorry, Mark," I began, my voice trembling. "I never meant for any of this to happen. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake." I searched his face for any sign of understanding, but all I saw was a wall of hurt. "A mistake?" he echoed, his voice rising. "You call betraying me a mistake?" The raw pain in his words cut deep, and I could feel my heart cracking under the weight of his accusation. "I know it sounds that way, but I was confused. David, he made me feel things I hadn't felt in years. But that doesn't change how I feel about you. I love you," I pleaded, desperation creeping into my voice. "Love?" he scoffed, shaking his head. "You love me, but you were in his arms. How am I supposed to believe that?" He turned away, running a hand through his hair, frustration radiating from him. "I never wanted to hurt you," I said softly, my voice breaking. "I want to fix this. Please, let's talk about it." Mark's silence hung heavily in the air. I waited, my heart racing, hoping he would look at me, hoping he would find a sliver of forgiveness. But as the moments ticked by, it felt like the distance between us was growing, and I realized that the path to reconciliation might be more complicated than I had hoped. I sat at my desk, the hum of the office around me feeling more like a distant echo than the bustling environment it usually was. My mind drifted between the chaotic feelings of guilt and the thrill that David's presence ignited within me. He had been persistent lately, weaving promises of a future together into our brief, stolen moments. I could still feel the warmth of his hands on my waist, the way his breath had quickened when he whispered sweet nothings into my ear. But the reality of my situation weighed heavily on my heart. "Emily," David's voice broke through my thoughts, smooth and inviting. He leaned against my cubicle, a charming smile playing on his lips. "Can we talk? I have some ideas about the campaign we discussed." I looked up, forcing a smile, but my stomach twisted in knots. "Sure, David. What do you have in mind?" I tried to focus on his words, but my mind kept drifting to Mark and the devastation my choices had caused. As we walked to a nearby conference room, David closed the door behind us. The air felt electric, and for a moment, I was lost in his gaze. "You know, I think we could really create something special together," he said, stepping closer. "You and me. It could be amazing." I took a breath, feeling the weight of his words. "David, But before I could finish, he interrupted me. "Emily, I know there are complications, but we can work through them. We just have to take that leap together." His eyes sparkled with a passion that both excited and terrified me. "David, it's not that simple. I have a husband." My voice trailed off, the memory of Mark's hurt face flashing in my mind. Your marriage is in ruins, Emily. You know that, he said, his tone shifting slightly, more urgent. Why hold on to something that doesn't bring you joy? I can give you everything you desire: passion, excitement, a future. I felt my heart race at his words, torn between the thrill David offered and the love I still had for Mark. You don't understand. It's not just about me. Mark deserves better than this. David stepped back slightly, a hint of frustration crossing his features. You're living in a fantasy. This is real life, and you need to make a choice. Don't you want to be happy? As I looked into his eyes, I saw a flicker of something deeper, a desire that mirrored my own. But could I really abandon my marriage for this? I ran a hand through my hair, feeling the weight of my choices pressing down on me. Emily, David said softly, stepping closer again. I want to build a life with you. Just imagine it. A fresh start, away from all this mess. His voice was low, enticing, and for a moment I could almost see it. But just as quickly as the vision appeared, it faded. I need time, David. I can't just walk away from my life, I said, my voice trembling. Time. Time is what you don't have. Every moment you hesitate is another moment wasted, he replied, frustration lacing his words. You need to decide. I won't wait forever. I felt a chill run through me. What do you mean by that? I asked, my heart racing. David hesitated, his expression shifting as he weighed his words. Let's just say, I have my own past with your husband's family, and it's complicated. What do you mean? I pressed, my instincts screaming at me to dig deeper. He looked away for a moment, his jaw tightening. I was once very close to Mark's sister. Things ended. Badly. I never thought I'd be in this position with you. But here we are. The revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. Wait, you were with her? Why didn't you tell me? I didn't think it mattered. But now it complicates things, doesn't it? He said, meeting my gaze. You need to understand, this is more than just an affair. There are layers to this, and I don't want to lose you, but I can't promise that Mark won't find out. I felt the room spin as I processed his words. My heart raced, caught in a whirlwind of emotions: betrayal, confusion, fear. Everything I thought I knew was unraveling before me. David, this changes everything, I whispered, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. Does it? He asked, his voice steady, but filled with an edge of uncertainty. Or does it just clarify what you really want? In that moment, I knew I was standing at a crossroads, and the decision ahead of me could shatter everything I held dear. The weight of David's revelation hung heavily in the air, suffocating me with a mix of disbelief and anger. I felt like a marionette with tangled strings, and David was the puppeteer pulling me deeper into this web of deceit. You had a serious relationship with Mark's sister? I spat out, my voice trembling with fury. How could you not tell me before? This changes everything. David, leaning against his desk, looked unfazed, an infuriating calmness radiating from him. Emily, it was years ago. It doesn't mean anything now. What matters is us. He stepped closer, attempting to bridge the growing chasm between us with his magnetic charm. But all I could feel was betrayal, like ice water coursing through my veins. No, David! I shouted, unable to contain the tumult of emotions that surged within me. You can't just gloss over your past like that. You knew how close I was to Mark. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Maybe I thought you'd understand. It was a complicated situation, he replied, his voice softer now, as if he were trying to soothe a wild animal. But what we have is real. It's different. Different? Is that what you call it? I paced the room, my mind racing. You've dragged me into this mess, and now I don't know who to trust, my husband or my lover. How can I possibly move forward knowing you share a history with my family?" David's expression hardened. "You think I wanted this? I didn't plan for us to get caught up in this chaos. But we can make it work, Emily. We can be happy together." I felt a surge of resentment. "Happy? You think I can just forget about my marriage? Mark deserves better than this. I owe him that much." "Maybe you owe it to yourself to explore what's true for you," he countered, frustration creeping into his tone. "This isn't just about him. It's about us." I stepped back, shaking my head. "You're being selfish. You've always been selfish." Just as the tension reached a boiling point, my phone buzzed violently on the table, startling both of us. I glanced at the screen, my heart dropping. An unknown number flashed ominously. Hesitantly, I opened the message. "I know what you did. You won't get away with this." Panic gripped me, squeezing the breath from my lungs. My thoughts raced, swirling with confusion and dread. Who was this? Did Mark know? My mind flitted through the possibilities like a film reel playing at double speed. I looked up at David, who was now watching me with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "What is it?" he asked, his voice low and serious. I showed him the message, my hands trembling. "I don't understand. Who could this be?" David's jaw tightened as he read the words. Could it be Mark? Or someone else who knows about us? I shook my head, feeling the walls close in around me. I can't take this anymore. This is spiraling out of control. "Emily," he said, his voice firm but laced with urgency. "We need to figure this out. You can't just walk away." But I felt rooted to the spot, paralyzed by the weight of my choices. "What do you want from me, David? Do you want me to choose you over my marriage? Over my life?" His gaze bore into mine, and for a moment, I saw vulnerability in his eyes. "I want you to choose what's best for you, even if it means leaving everything behind." I turned away, my mind racing. The walls of our affair were closing in, and the threat of exposure loomed larger than ever. My heart raced as I contemplated my next move, the uncertainty of my situation choking me. I could feel my life unraveling thread by thread, and in that moment, I realized I was on the edge of a precipice. I stood frozen, contemplating the life I had built and the choices I had made. Every breath felt like a weight on my chest, and the message buzzed in my mind like a relentless siren. I had to make a decision, but the stakes had never been higher. Would I risk everything for a chance at happiness? Or would I cling to the remnants of my crumbling marriage? The silence in the room felt deafening, and I knew I had to act before it was too late.